Hey there, it is Dr. Will Lee, and I'm here back with my 5 with Dr. Lee program. I've got an amazing guest today, but before I introduce him, I am going to tell you not to forget to download your own list of my Grand Slammer foods. Now, Grand Slammer foods are foods that activate all of your body's health defense systems at the same time. So it's a list that I've actually put together for more than 200 foods in my book, Eat to Beat Disease. And this is sort of like the gold. These are the foods that will actually activate your angiogenesis system, stem cells, microbiome, DNA protection, and your immune system. So if you want to actually get a shortcut to Sure Health, download my Grand Slammer list. It's in the link in my bio. All right, today I am going to be joined by a really special guy. His name is Dr. Stephen Gundry. I'm going to introduce him in a second. Dr. Gundry is best known as a cardiothoracic surgeon. He has had a whole career of actually helping people through cardiothoracic surgery, and then he actually became a nutrition doctor to try to help people avoid surgery. Some of you may have read his book, The Plant Paradox, and now he's got a new book that is actually called Unlocking the Keto Code. And so we're going to hear about some new paradoxes that he's going to talk about as well. Dr. Gundry is all about health and happiness and longevity. So I'm going to actually wait for him to come on board, and I can't wait to introduce you to him. I met him a few years ago, and I did his podcast in Los Angeles, and what a class act, a really great guy. So, but he's actually got some new science I want him to share with us to be able to actually figure out what's going on with keto. So, don't see him just yet. All right, let me just tell you a little bit of what I'm working on right now. I'm actually working on trying to understand how the body's metabolism actually develops from the time we're a baby all the way through our young adulthood to adolescence. How does puberty affect that? And then what happens when we're a young adult? And that's actually something that's really important because that's connected to our metabolism, puberty, hormones, and also, of course, the food that we eat, and probably the food that our moms ate as well. So that's actually something that I'm working on right now. I am just waiting to see when Dr. Gundry is going to join us. I don't see him yet. Okay, we're going to keep on going. Let's see, what else can I tell you? What did I eat today? This is a question I always get, like, what did Dr. Lee eat? I had a sumo mandarin orange. Now, where do I get the food list? All you got to do is go to the link in my bio and download the Grand Slammer list. I'll just tell you, there's like dark chocolates on there, tea is on there, and you'll see some other great surprises. So I had a I had a sumo orange today. I don't have it with me, but it's like there's this big, warbly orange thing, and you pop the top open. It's got a really thick skin, and you can always see the dietary fiber that's in it right from the get-go. It's kind of stringy, but man, what a juicy, seedless piece of citrus. It's got loaded with vitamin C, which I know is anti-inflammatory. The fiber actually feeds the gut microbiome, and all kinds of goodness like that. So I'm still waiting for Dr. Gundry. I don't see him yet. And I really want to talk to him about his new book, Unlocking the Keto Code, but we'll just keep going. So that's what I actually had today. I had coffee. Now, one of the things that, and I'm looking at some of the questions that are coming in here, I had some coffee. Now, coffee contains chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid actually is one of those bioactives, Mother Nature's kind of chemicals that actually activate our health defenses. That's really, really awesome. One of the things that I think is so spectacular about it is that chlorogenic acid and drinking coffee actually slows down the rate of cellular aging. So our cells all age at their own pace. And when you actually drink coffee, you slow down the burn. So think about your telomeres as kind of a fuse, like Mission Impossible. You light the fuse, it burns down closer to, bam, explodes. When you slow down the fuse, you're actually slowing down cellular aging. So coffee is a great way to do it. I used to live in Italy, and so the way I kind of learned to love coffee was really a really strong cup of espresso. So I've got one of those old-fashioned espresso kind of containers. It looks like a figure of eight, and you unscrew it and you put a little bit of ground coffee. I grind my own coffee from beans. You scoop it in, put a little water in the bottom, and you just put it on the stovetop, and it'll make this perfect, amazing cup of coffee. Green tea has a different bioactive that is actually called, I think I see somebody. Hang on a second. All right. No, that's not him. Green tea actually has other bioactives. These are called catechins. And catechins are also bioactives. They're polyphenols that are found in green tea. And when you steep your tea bag, one of the interesting things about steeping your tea bag is when you steep it, you dunk it. When you dunk the tea bag, actually you're allowing more of those polyphenols to get onto the tea. So that's a little kind of a trick to know. If you use whole leaf green tea and just soak it, let's see, I've got another person coming in. Let's see. No, if you actually have if you're using whole leaf green tea, you can actually put new hot water in a tea about 3 times, and you'll still continue to get the catechins out of there. And then the last thing I'll tell you about actually is about putting dairy into milk. Now, I love an English tea as much as anyone else. What a amazing kind of ritual that they do in England. They do black tea, they have a little milk in the tea. But I will tell you that the dairy, the cow fat in milk you put into tea forms these tiny little soap bubbles. And the soap bubbles surround okay, let's see, I think Dr. Gundry here. Looks like he's asking me. Okay, go live, Dr. Let's wait to get him in. We'll talk about tea. They form these little soap. Hey,
sorry about
Dr.
that.
Gundry, how are you doing? Good to see you.
I'm great to see you, Dr. Lee. Great to see you.
I love your glasses. We got the blue thing going on.
Yeah, you're right. We called and planned all this.
All right. Well, look, I've been sort of I've just been sort of keeping my audience warmed up. This is a part of my program I call 5 with Dr. Lee. So we've been talking about 5 different things that are of interest. But the one thing I really wanted to talk about is your exciting new book, Unlocking the Keto Code. And I'm wondering if you could tell us more about that, because one of the things that I know we've all heard about is the ketogenic diet. And I've done some work in that for cancer, but I know that you've done that looking at other aspects of health and longevity. And one of the things that you're talking about is the fact that there's a lot of misunderstandings about the ketogenic diet. Can you tell us what is being misunderstood and what is the truth?
Well, I guess the truth always changes, and one of the things that I guess I'm known for is that when I discover something that I was wrong about, I tell people that I was wrong about something and tell them why I was wrong about something. So when I was writing my last book, the Energy Paradox, I had a chapter explaining, I thought, how ketones work, how a ketogenic diet works. And you're right, one of the original interests in the ketogenic diet was in cancer. And Otto Warburg really spent his career emphasizing that perhaps a ketogenic diet could defeat cancer metabolism. In fact, interesting fact, he was a homosexual Jew living in Nazi Germany. And Hitler was so afraid of cancer that he kept Otto Warburg in his institute during the entire Nazi regime. One of the few people that literally wasn't killed because of his belief system. And it was that important to Hitler. So,
well, obviously there's something important about this biology that we need to actually unlock. And that's the title actually of your new book, Unlocking the Keto Code. So let's go ahead and start unlocking it. What do you want to, what's new that you have discovered about ketosis or ketogenic diets?
well, one thing It's interesting that we were wrong about how ketones are actually a fabulous fuel that our mitochondria would prefer to use above all other things. And this was actually work out of Harvard by Dr. Cahill, George Cahill, and out of the NIH by Dr. Veach. And they found that actually ketones, even at full ketosis, and for people who want to know what ketones are normally produced by the liver when we are starving or when we run out of glucose or amino acids as a fuel, and we switch to burning free fatty acids and also switch to making ketones in the liver. And particularly Dr. Veach believed that ketones were miraculous, that we always ought to be in ketosis, we ought to be starving. And yet Dr. Owens at Harvard showed with human volunteers that even at full ketosis, we can only get 30% of our energy needs met by burning ketones. And our brain, which can survive on ketones, which can get into the brain, unlike free fatty acids, even at full ketosis, the brain only gets 60 to 70% of its energy needs met by ketones, and the rest has to come from glucose. And as you and I know, cancer cells actually, because of this, have a wonderful workaround from a ketogenic diet. But it turns out that ketones aren't some miraculous fuel, but they're miraculous signaling molecules. And you and I have spent our careers in different areas being very impressed with the ability of signaling molecules, particularly in plants, to do some fascinating things with cancer cells, with metabolism. And what ketones do is actually tell mitochondria to protect themselves at all costs, because as far as the mitochondria knows, the ketone bodies are produced because you're starving to death. And in extremis, if we're starving to death, you've got to keep your mitochondria, because if the mitochondria die, which are the energy power plants in all of our cells, that's the end of us. And so, contrary to popular belief, ketones actually tell mitochondria to protect themselves with a unique mechanism called mitochondrial uncoupling.
Can you explain that? I mean, now here's what I've actually heard you say that makes total sense to me. That ketones, which the brain uses as best it can, have another function, and that other function is kind of like the finger on the doorbell to ring the doorbell to signal the something inside the mitochondria to do something. So what is that uncoupling? What does that mean to uncouple mitochondria?
Believe it or not, uncoupling was described back in the 1970s to explain normally in our mitochondria to produce ATP, we couple oxygen molecules with protons from the food we eat. And in that coupling process, that joining process, we produce ATP, much simplistic. The process of trying to get an oxygen molecule to couple with a proton requires a lot of work, and it's incredibly damaging to mitochondria. And we hear about reactive oxygen species, we hear about free radicals, which are all part and parcel of the damage that can occur trying to couple protons and oxygen. So we have a system where if the damage gets too high or the pressure within the mitochondria gets too high, we have pop-off valves, very much like a pop-off valve in a pressure cooker that releases the pressure, releases the steam. And these are controlled by what are called uncoupling proteins. And what they do is they open these trap doors in mitochondria and allow protons to escape from making ATP. So they're literally uncoupled from the process of making ATP. And here's what's shocking. At rest, you and I right now talking, 30% of all the calories that enter our mitochondria for processing into ATP are actually thrown away out these emergency exits, pop-off valves. And you go, well, wait a minute, that's really dumb as an organism. Why should you and I have to eat 30% more calories just to stay alive? Well, part of the reason is that this is dangerous to mitochondria. But the other part is we actually generate heat by uncoupling mitochondria. And we're warm-blooded animals. And so a lot of this waste is not wasteful at all, but it generates heat. We know, for instance, most of us have heard of brown fat. That's the fat that babies are born with. It's up underneath our collarbones and in our back. And we know that brown fat generates a lot of heat. And we've thought that babies have it to stay warm. Well, it turns out that brown fat is called brown fat because it is stuffed to the gills with mitochondria. And if under the microscope, it looks brown. It's so dense with mitochondria. And so we now know that in brown fat, the mitochondria are aggressively uncoupled, and that's why it generates heat. And one of the things that fascinated me in my career is, as you and I know, there are a lot of thermogenic compounds in plants. A lot of polyphenols, a lot of phytonutrients are thermogenic. And we know this, we can see the effect they do, but one of my interesting aha moments was these phytonutrients are thermogenic because they are actually uncoupling mitochondria. And in the uncoupling process, two things happen. Heat's generated, but more importantly, the mitochondria are protected from damage, number one. Number two, when mitochondria uncoupled by, for instance, ketones or polyphenols, they actually are stimulated to make more mitochondria, to actually share the workload. And it's called mitogenesis. And you and I know that mitochondria carry their own DNA that are totally separate from the nucleus. And the cool thing is that mitochondria can divide without the cell they're living in dividing. And they can actually divide and divide and divide. So one of the fascinating things that ketones do is not only tell mitochondria to not work so hard, to blow off steam, to protect themselves, but to grow and divide, to share the workload with other new mitochondria. So one of the beauties of ketones is not because it's a great fuel, but it's as a mitochondrial protectant. And you and I have learned through the years that mitochondrial dysfunction is really part and parcel for most of our disease processes and, in fact, cancer. And Otto Warburg was convinced that somehow the cancer cells were genetically unable to utilize their mitochondria properly. And he was wrong about that, but he was right that cancer cells have decided, because of mitochondrial dysfunction, to use the ancient process of fermentation, glycolysis, to produce energy instead of relying on their mitochondria.
So you're basically talking about a completely different interpretation of the benefits of generating ketones through a ketogenic diet. You're talking about a different action on helping to protect our cells and protect the mitochondria, and in fact actually prompt the mitochondria through this signaling, this ringing of the doorbell, to create more mitochondria, which actually just it protects the cell, gives us more ability to have energy. And the mitochondria is kind of like, think about it like this, like the battery of your cell phone. Your cell phone's got to do all kinds of stuff, but you know that if your battery in your phone goes bad, it's time to get a new phone. That's the end of it. And so that's really one of the important things. So tell us about some hacks in your book. I mean, I want people to go out to buy the book. I'm going to buy the book so I can actually read it and learn some, some tricks. But what are some of the techniques that are practical that like everyone who's watching can actually use in their own life? Like what are a couple of simple things they can do to utilize this this mitochondria?
Sure. Well, one of the simplest tricks is something I've used in my ketogenic diet in my clinic, which actually has a lot of carbohydrates in it, because you and I know the benefits of plant phytonutrients and plant polyphenols. And it turns out the more polyphenols we get in our diet, and those are the brightly colored fruits and vegetables that we both talk about, these actually uncouple mitochondria. And that's actually how they work. But more importantly, MCT oil, medium chain triglycerides, are unique as fats because, unlike any other fats that we could consume, medium chain triglycerides go directly through the wall of our gut, up the portal vein to the liver directly. And in the liver, they're converted automatically into ketones. Now, the important part about that is most people have heard of the Atkins blues or the keto flu, where following a low carbohydrate diet, you feel awful for a number of days. Your brain doesn't work right, you have low energy, you have a headache. And that's because most of us can't actually convert from burning sugar to burning free fatty acids or even ketones because of high insulin levels, because of insulin resistance, prediabetes, whatever we want to call it. But MCT oil can bypass that system and generate ketones instantaneously. So I make a joke, you and I could have a fresh fruit salad, which you might do, I probably wouldn't for other reasons, but I could have a couple of tablespoons of MCT oil and I would be in ketosis, whereas you wouldn't be. So I could get the benefits of the phytonutrients in the fruit, but I could still get the benefits of ketones. Now, another shocking thing is medium chain triglycerides carry the name capra from the Latin for goat. So there's capric acid, caprylic acid, and so on. The reason they carry those names is that they were actually discovered that 30% of the fats in goat and sheep milk is actually medium chain triglycerides.
Interesting. So is that found in like goat cheese and sheep's cheese?
Goat cheese, sheep cheese, goat yogurt, sheep yogurt, and buffalo mozzarella. Now, unfortunately, cow milk doesn't have that sort of MCTs. But the great hack is that you and I could have a piece of goat or sheep cheese and actually produce ketones just by enjoying that delicious piece of cheese. And so what fun is that? What a great hack is that? And interestingly enough, if you actually look at a number of the blue zones, and I'm actually the only nutritionist who spent most of my career living in a blue zone, and that was Loma Linda, California, where I was a professor for most of my career. You look at blue zones, and one of the unique factors of 4 of the blue zones is the amount of goat and sheep cheeses that these communities eat. The 5th blue zone, Okinawa, is a blue zone not because they eat grains and beans, they don't. It's because 85% of their ancient calories came from the purple sweet potato, which is just a polyphenol, tour de force of anthocyanins. So all of these communities, in one way or another, were actively uncoupling their mitochondria. And here's one more really fun fact. This was discovered by a researcher by the name of Martin Brand, who I'm really indebted to. Martin Brand looked at super old people, folks 105 years and older, who were doing well. And he looked at their mitochondrial uncoupling, the uncoupling proteins, and they had the highest uncoupled mitochondria of any other people. So you really want to uncouple your mitochondria to survive. And as I argue in the book, there's some very intriguing ways to, let's just say, prevent cancer or even defeat cancer. And I bring up my 16-and-a-half-year-old Labradoodle, huge old girl by the name of Pearl, who a year and a half ago was diagnosed with inoperable bladder cancer. She literally could not urinate. And when the ultrasound came back and they said, we're so sorry, we can either put her to sleep or we can refer her to a veterinary oncologist for chemotherapy. And I said, oh, well, that's okay. I treat a lot of cancer in my office, so I'll put her on my program. You can't have a placebo effect with a dog. Within 2 weeks, she was urinating normally. And when we finally saw the oncologist, she said, well, good for you for doing that, but, that's not going to last very long. And we need to give her chemotherapy this afternoon. And we can probably give her 6 months. Well, that was a year and a half ago. Just had Pearl out for a walk of 2.5 miles this morning. She pees like a racehorse, and her bladder works just fine. So I'm not saying.
And what was it that you were feeding Pearl?
I'm glad you asked. I actually gave her a lot of polyphenol supplements that uncouple mitochondria. And I make an argument in the book on how I think this works. And basically, I think Otto Warburg was right. Clearly, there's a mitochondrial defect. And there are those of us who believe that when our mitochondria are dysfunctional, our body goes back to the ancient program. You and I are old enough to remember when Windows started. If you screwed up and restarted the computer, it would operate in safe mode.
Yeah.
And you could do a few things until you figured it out. But I come from the feeling that cancer cells operate in a safe mode where they don't trust mitochondria, and they rely on fermentation. And in safe mode, they have no contact inhibition, where hitting one cell stops things. And that's the ancient program of before eukaryotic cells were formed. And I will argue that if we bring our mitochondria back online, like we recharge the phone battery, then the cell will trust the mitochondria again and become a non-cancerous cell. And I've seen this so many times in my clinic. I'm not making any claims, but I've seen this enough, and now I've seen it in my dog where it can't be a placebo effect. That I think the more, and you and I would absolutely agree about this, the more we can take care of our mitochondria and our cell membranes with the foods we eat, the better off we're going to be. And the other argument I need to make to all my keto friends is a traditional keto diet is devoid of plant phytonutrient compounds that our gut microbiome has to have to make use of those prebiotic fibers to make postbiotics like butyrate, like acetate, that actually also uncouple mitochondria. And so when you come down to it, this book is exciting for me because so many of the healthy things that you've promoted, and thank you so much for your work, and I promoted in others, it comes down to the effect of all these things uncoupling our mitochondria and actually making our mitochondria healthy and working better.
Well, this is like a tour de force explanation of a very important book that really takes the whole discussion about ketogenic diet to the next level. And what I love about it, you and I are both scientists by our training, is really how do we actually keep up with the science and help everyone benefit from learning what science is teaching us. So thank you for writing the book. Where can people get it? Where do they find out more about where do they get the book, and where do they find out more about what you're doing? And this idea.
So, Amazon.com, it's #1 in multiple categories this week. It just was released. Barnes & Noble, barnesandnoble.com. Please, please, please go to your local bookseller. I've had multiple New York Times bestsellers. They'll have the book, I promise. They've really suffered during the pandemic, and they really need our help. You can find me at drgundry.com. You can find my supplement and food company at gundrymd.com. I have a podcast, the Dr. Gundry Podcast, and we've had you as a guest. Thank you again. And you can find me on YouTube and Instagram, just like you. And Yeah, we're scientists that want to, get this useful information to people to use on a daily basis rather than keeping it locked up in a lab, right?
I totally agree. Listen, thank you so much, Dr. Gundry, for your work, writing the book, bringing it to the audience. Explain, one of the things that I think is so important is to explain complicated things in simple ways that everyone can actually put into use in their everyday life. And that's what we've been doing. And so I really want to thank you again for doing it. I want everyone actually to go out and buy Unlocking the Keto Code. I'm going to do it myself. I want to dig deeper into everything we've been talking about. And for anyone watching, don't forget to sign up for my Grand Slammer list of foods. You can download it. The link is in my bio. Thank you, Dr. Gundry, and looking forward to connecting again.
That's right. Well, let's see each other in person the next time.
Let's do it.
All right. Thanks a lot
Bye-bye.
for having me. Appreciate it.
Bye.